Welcome back to another deep dive. We are so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We've got a really fun one today.
We really do. So I want you to picture, just for a second, the traditional bridal bow.
Okay, yep, the classic.
Right, like for decades, it was just this polite little ribbon, Like a sweet, predictable afterthought. Maybe it was holding a sash together or just sitting quietly at the nape of the neck.
Yeah, very safe, very classically polite.
Exactly. You always knew exactly what it was trying to communicate. But if you walk into a bridal atelier today or just look at the styling trends in 2026, that polite little ribbon it's completely mutated.
Oh, totally. It is not an afterthought anymore.
Not at all. It has become this massive structural, architectural weapon that is just entirely hijacking the modern silhouette. We are looking at a landscape where the bow is basically commanding the room.
Yeah, designers have just completely stopped treating it as a finishing touch. Now they're treating it as the foundational architecture of the garment itself, which is this total subversion of expectations. What used to be the quietest part of a dress is now the loudest, most undeniable focal point.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. Because whether you are actively curating a style for a wedding, or really if you're just fascinated by the rapid, almost aggressive evolution of fashion like we are, you're probably scouring niche platforms to figure out how to navigate these shifts.
Definitely. It can be super overwhelming.
Oh, for sure. So today we are relying on this brilliantly detailed styling piece from the Weddizer website. If you don't know it, Weddizer is this incredibly robust hub for wedding event guidance, especially in their article section.
Yeah, it's such a great resource for this kind of niche styling.
It really is. And they have thoroughly decoded this inescapable 2026 trend bow details everywhere. But they don't just say, hey, bows are popular.
No, they really get into the weeds.
Right. They break down the mechanics of the fabrics, the strategic geography of where these bows are placed, and the specific styling rules you need to actually pull this off without looking ridiculous.
And that research provides a phenomenal lens, I think, because it approaches styling as a cohesive strategy. It treats the bow not as some random embellishment,
right,
but as a deliberate design choice, one that requires you to balance your entire look around it. And, as we'll get into, even the entire aesthetic of your event.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the whole event thing later, but before we get into the physical garments, I want to start with the psychology of this shift, because it genuinely feels counterintuitive to me.
How so?
Well, we live in an era where designers have access to literally any futuristic material, right? Laser-cut fabrics, 3D printed embellishments, smart textiles.
Yeah, the tech is crazy.
But the industry is suddenly completely obsessed with a knotted piece of fabric. Like, why? Why is this specific aesthetic absolutely dominating right now?
Well, I think it's a direct reaction to the fatigue we've seen in the formal wear markets over the last, say, 5 to 10 years.
The fatigue? People are just tired of the usual stuff.
Exactly. The industry had kind of polarized into two really exhausting extremes. On one side, you had this severe minimalism.
Oh, right. The slip dresses.
Yes. The ultra-sleek, totally unadorned slip dresses. And those demand absolutely flawless tailoring, and honestly, they leave the wearer feeling entirely exposed.
Yeah, no room for error there.
None at all. And then on the other side, you had heavy maximalism. We're talking head-to-toe rhinestones, dense beadwork.
Like wearing a chandelier?
Literally. Heavy crystal appliques. It's physically exhausting to wear. So the resurgence of the bow is driven by this collective desire for a third option.
Got a middle ground.
Right. People want highly romantic, fashion-forward looks that provide massive volume and visual drama. But, and this is key, without the literal physical weight of thousands of glass beads dragging them down.
That makes total sense. So a giant structural bow gives you this massive silhouette footprint, but it weighs, what, mere ounces?
Exactly. It's the illusion of mass.
It's the illusion of mass. I love that. And it feels deeply vintage, too, referencing historical Victorian or Edwardian fashion.
Yes, the historical nod is definitely there.
But because designers are playing with these absurd new scales and proportions, it feels hyper-modern at the same time. To me, it's kind of like a punctuation mark on an outfit. It's no longer just a functional knot, it's an exclamation point.
That is a perfect analogy. And the scale is really what bridges that gap between classic grace and bold individuality. When you take a traditional symbol of femininity and you blow it up to the size of a piece of furniture,
right,
you completely change its context. You aren't just wearing a dress anymore. You're wearing a piece of soft, sculpt.
Soft sculpture, wow.
Yeah, and the Weddizer platform points this out beautifully.
Hmm.
If you're using their articles to curate your style, the bow is basically the ultimate tool for personalization. It lets you tap into traditional bridal romance, but you're also aggressively asserting your own modern editorial edge.
So that structural element completely changes how we talk about placement, right? Like where you put that exclamation point changes the whole message of the dress.
Absolutely. The geography of the bow is everything.
The Weddizer piece breaks down this geography, and I want to look at the front of the dress first. The waistline, the neckline, maybe those mini sleeves.
Yeah, the front bows are fascinating.
To me, a bow on the front acts as an anchor. It creates an instant, highly contained focal point that stops the eye from wandering.
That's exactly what it does. Placing a bow at the waistline, for instance, is a very deliberate architectural trick. It cinches the visual center of the silhouette, so it immediately draws attention to the narrowest part of the body.
Right, but a neckline bow does something entirely different.
Totally different, especially on like a strapless or off-the-shoulder gown.
Hmm.
By placing a structured element right at the collarbone, you're creating a frame for the face.
It's like built-in statement jewelry.
Yes, it operates exactly like a piece of statement jewelry. The styling guidance emphasizes that front bows let you have a bold, modern look, but it remains heavily contained. You are framing the wearer, so you still see the person first, and the sculptural element second.
Okay, but this is where the dynamic completely flips and where I think the trend reaches its absolute peak. We move from the contained framing aspect of the front bow to the sheer theatricality of the back.
The back bow, the main event.
The back bow in 2026 is no longer just a detail. We are talking about trailing designs that flow down to become the actual train of the dress.
Right, or those massive, stiff origami-like satin masterpieces sitting right on the lower lumbar.
Yes. It reminds me of, the aerodynamic tail fin of a classic 1950s Cadillac.
Oh, wow.
Like it serves absolutely no practical function other than creating this unforgettable, dramatic silhouette as it moves away from you.
The Cadillac tail fin is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Designers are basically utilizing the back of the gown as a massive, uninterrupted canvas.
Which makes sense for an event.
Exactly. Think about the choreography of a traditional wedding ceremony. The guests are seated, and for the vast majority of the 30 to 40-minute event, what are they looking at?
The back of the couple.
Entirely at the back of the couple. By engineering a magnificent structured piece of art on the back of the gown, you are giving the audience a dynamic visual exactly where their eyes are naturally forced to rest.
I mean, I see the artistic value there. It's beautiful. But this massive architectural drama creates a very obvious problem in my mind.
I know where you're going with this.
Like, I read oversized, structured satin masterpiece on the lower back, and my brain instantly goes to the physics of sitting down.
Right, the logistics.
Yeah. An oversized, trailing back bow sounds incredible for a grand entrance. But isn't that an absolute logistical nightmare the second you have to, get into a getaway car, or sit down for a 5-course dinner?
It really is.
Or navigate a crowded dance floor? Are people just awkwardly leaning forward in their chairs for 6 hours to protect their dress?
No. And that tension between high-fashion editorial aesthetics and the physical realities of a human body moving through a party is exactly what designers have had to solve.
So what's the solution?
The sources, especially the Weddizer article, highlight the most critical engineering advancement driving this trend, and that is detachable architecture.
Detachable. Wait, so it's not just modular fashion, it's engineered for performance.
It's literal load-bearing engineering.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you have 3 to 5 pounds of heavy Duchess satin gathered into a massive structural knot on the lower back.
3 to 5 pounds, that's heavy.
Very heavy. You cannot simply pin that to the outer layer of a delicate silk gown. It will pull, it will sag, and it will completely ruin the drape of the entire dress.
So what do they do?
Designers are engineering industrial strength, hidden snap and hook systems. These connection points often tether directly through the outer fabric into the gown's internal corsetry.
That is fascinating. The dress literally has an internal skeleton just to support the weight of the bow.
Precisely. Which means the bride gets that high-impact, dramatic structural moment for the ceremony walk and the formal portraits. Peak editorial drama.
But then,
right before the reception, it unclips. You transition instantly to a more practical, streamlined silhouette for dining and dancing without having to purchase a completely separate reception dress.
wow, it's a mechanical solution to an aesthetic problem. That's so smart.
It offers the ultimate versatility.
Okay, but let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum for a minute. If the bow has essentially become a piece of wearable furniture, how does someone who fundamentally hates maximalist fashion survive this trend?
That's a great question.
Like, if you are a minimalist at heart and you don't want to walk into a room looking like a giant, beautiful present, how do you acknowledge the cultural moment without feeling like you're wearing a costume?
Well, the minimalist approach isn't about hiding the trend. It's about radically controlling its volume. The Weddizer styling guidance categorizes this as bow
Bow
accents,
accents, okay.
right, where the scale is dialed all the way back. But the impact remains sharp. You are using the bow as a texture rather than a structure.
The whisper instead of the shout.
Exactly that. So, a sleek, unadorned silk column dress can be paired with a cathedral-length veil that features just a tiny, delicate bow trim along the very edge.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
Or you see bow-embellished belts that add a micro hint of texture to the waist. And we are seeing incredible shoe designs, like a minimalist stiletto with a sharp, structured bow sitting right on the back of the heel.
I love the shoe example.
Even hair accessories, where a sleek architectural chignon is finished with a single structural bow pin.
I love that because it proves that hitting a trend is often just about smart accessory placement. Like, you don't need a massive gown to be on trend.
No, not at all.
You keep your core aesthetic entirely clean and untouched, but you project that you understand exactly what the current fashion language is. You're participating, but on your own terms.
And it creates a beautiful visual tension, too. When a minimalist incorporates one tiny, highly structured bow onto a shoe or a veil, it actually draws more attention to the clean, severe lines of the rest of the dress.
Ah.
The contrast makes the minimalism look intentional rather than, understyled.
Okay, so we've covered the geography and the scale, from the massive lumbar tail fin to the micro accent on a shoe. I want to dig into the physics of the fabrics themselves next,
Let's do it.
because we all generally know what these fabrics look like, right? Satin is glossy, tulle is sheer. But I am trying to wrap my head around the structural engineering here.
It's all about the fabric.
Right. I mean, choosing the fabric for a bow, is it kind of like choosing the building materials for a house? Like, you wouldn't build a skyscraper out of silk.
That is exactly what it is. You cannot force a textile to behave against its inherent physical properties. The research breaks this down brilliantly. Let's look at satin first, specifically heavy Duchess satin.
The building blocks of luxury fashion.
Yes, and structurally, it is incredibly dense. Satin has a very tight weave that naturally resists folding.
Okay.
So when you force it into a bow, that resistance creates mechanical tension. The loops of the bow actively want to spring open, which means they stand up proudly against gravity. They hold a sharp, crisp edge.
So if you want that oversized architectural back bow that looks like it was carved out of marble.
You build it with dense satin.
Exactly.
Okay, so then what happens when you try to do that with tulle? Because tulle is essentially netting, right? We know it gives that ethereal, romantic floating effect.
Right.
But how do designers prevent an oversized tulle bow from just, collapsing into a messy, deflated puff of netting on the back of the dress?
Well, tulle presents a massive structural challenge precisely because it lacks that tension we just talked about. It is mostly empty space.
So how do they fix it?
To create an oversized tulle bow, designers have to use dozens of meticulously gathered layers, or sometimes even build a hidden sheer wire framework inside the loops.
Wow, wire. Yeah, because a tulle bow isn't meant to look crisp or sharp. The goal is for it to look light, airy, like a soft, floating cloud that reacts to the air currents in the room as the person walks.
And then the sources also mention organza, which sits somewhere in the middle of this physics experiment, right?
Organza is fascinating. It's highly transparent like tulle, but its threads are twisted very tightly during the weaving process.
Oh, okay.
This gives it a rigid, crisp stiffness. So when you tie an organza bow, it traps air within its loops, creating this massive structured volume without any actual weight.
So you get size without the heavy drag.
Yes, it gives you a very modern, avant-garde, almost glassy look. It holds a shape significantly better than tulle, but looks much lighter than satin.
And lace, I imagine, is just pure vintage elegance.
Exactly. Lace brings that intricate historical texture.
That completely changes how you look at a garment. You aren't just looking at a design, you're looking at a textile behaving exactly the way it's woven physics demand. But pulling this off requires a strict adherence to what I would call visual real estate. Like, you only have so much space to grab the eye, so you have to spend it wisely. The Weddizer styling guidance is very rigid about this rule of balance.
Oh, the rule of balance is non-negotiable if you want to avoid looking absurd. The rule dictates that the louder the bow, the quieter the surrounding canvas must be.
Right.
The styling around the dress must defer entirely to the architectural element.
So if a bride has that massive, dense satin back bow,
The hair cannot be down in flowing, voluminous curls covering the shoulders and back. It creates visual clutter. The architecture demands a sleek, severe bun or a highly polished structural ponytail.
just to get it out of the way.
Exactly. The hair must be pulled up so the bow has room to breathe. Conversely, if you have a soft, ethereal tulle bow on the front neckline, severe hair looks too harsh. Soft, controlled waves complement the romance of the netting beautifully.
And this extends to the jewelry and makeup as well, right?
Absolutely. The universal recommendation across the board is to embrace a natural, luminous makeup palette. You enhance features without competing for attention.
Keep it natural.
Right. And accessories must be ruthlessly edited down. A neckline bow, for example, completely eliminates the possibility of wearing a necklace.
Because the bow is the necklace.
Exactly. You rely on simple pearl studs or a delicate minimalist drop earring, maybe minimalist heels. The bow is your primary accessory. Everything else is just background support.
That makes the styling process so much more analytical. But, there's another layer to this that I think is the most fascinating part of the entire trend.
What's that?
There is a very modern, highly technological reason why we are seeing this specific structural shift right now, especially the explosion of the dramatic back bow, and it has everything to do with how we consume media.
Oh, the social media aspect, yes.
We are living in the era of the photo-worthy, Instagram-ready wedding. The relationship between fashion design and the camera has fundamentally changed.
It really has. Because if you look at the history of event photography, for decades, it was a purely two-dimensional front-facing medium.
Right. You stood shoulder to shoulder with your partner, faced the photographer, and smiled for the mantelpiece portrait.
Exactly. The back of the dress was rarely, if ever, documented in any meaningful way.
But now we live in the era of the 360-degree algorithmic event. We aren't just looking at static photos anymore.
No, the modern event is captured via sweeping drone shots orbiting the couple. It is captured in slow-motion TikTok reels, in candid, constantly moving video formats.
And those formats demand dynamic visuals from every conceivable angle.
Exactly. A dress that is only interesting from the front is actually a massive missed opportunity in a 360-degree content environment. Bows add critical dimension, movement, and visual interest in a three-dimensional space.
So it needs to perform from a 45-degree angle. It needs to perform from behind as the person is walking away.
An oversized bow photographs spectacularly well when someone is moving away from the lens, turning over their shoulder, or spinning on a dance floor. Designers are literally engineering garments to perform dynamically for algorithms, like TikTok and Pinterest, just as much as for the guests sitting in the room.
That is wild. You are generating engaging visual content simply by existing and moving through the space.
It really is wild.
And this obsession with visual continuity doesn't stop at the hemline of the dress either. This is where leaning on a comprehensive platform like Weddizer for event guidance really shows its value, I think.
How so?
Well, they don't just advise you on how to pick a dress in a vacuum. They show you how to take that single, highly specific fashion detail and turn it into a cascading, unifying theme for an entire ecosystem, like an entire event.
Oh, yeah. It's the difference between throwing a party and curating a cohesive world. When you identify a strong motif, like the structural bow, you can weave that DNA through every touch point of the event.
Right. The styling pieces outline this brilliantly. We're talking about bridesmaid dresses, featuring subtle, echoing bow accents that nod to the bride without competing with her.
Yes.
Chair decorations at the reception tied with heavy satin knots that physically mimic the tension of the dress's fabric.
It's all connected.
Exactly. Gift wrapping and stationery that utilize the exact same organza textures. Even the culinary design, they talk about wedding cakes adorned with massive structural sugar bows, right? Sculpted to perfectly match the drape of the gown.
And finding this kind of cohesive event guidance is exactly why platforms like that are so valuable. Because when you carry a textural and visual motif through an environment with that level of discipline, it elevates the entire aesthetic.
It makes it feel so intentional.
It really does. It creates a subconscious visual through line for the guests. The physical space feels incredibly bespoke and high-end because every single element is speaking the exact same design language.
You aren't just hosting a dinner. You are building a temporary, immersive little world where the physical laws and aesthetics are dictated entirely by tulle, organza, and satin.
It's immersive styling. You are extending your personal aesthetic out into the physical room.
So we've unpacked quite a journey today. We've seen how this inescapable 2026 bow trend has basically ripped up the traditional rulebook.
It really has.
It has evolved from a polite, expected little ribbon into an aggressive piece of architectural expression. And it offers this incredible spectrum from the hyper-minimalist whisper of a micro bow on a veil to the deafening, theatrical shout of a load-bearing, detachable satin back bow.
Right.
We've looked at how different fabrics like heavy Duchess satin and crisp organza utilize mechanical tension to defy gravity, and how pulling this off demands ruthless discipline in balancing your visual real estate with minimal accessories.
And the most important takeaway from the styling sources is that this is not a fleeting micro-trend that will just vanish next season.
It's sticking around.
Very much so. The articles briefly touch on the future of the trend, and designers are actively pushing the structural boundaries even further as we look ahead.
Like what? What's next?
We're already seeing the emergence of asymmetrical bow placements that challenge traditional balance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, complex layered bows that weave multiple contrasting fabrics together, and bold, colorful variations that completely fracture the traditional white and ivory palettes.
Wow.
The bow has proven itself to be a deeply versatile, endlessly adaptable design foundation.
It has fully transitioned from the afterthought to the absolute main event. But, looking at the driving forces behind this, specifically the 360-degree camera angles and the demand for algorithmic movement, it leaves me with a final thought.
Okay.
Something for you to mull over as you think about your own styling choices, whether you are utilizing platforms to curate a massive event or simply deciding what to wear on a Friday night.
Always a good thing to think about.
Right. We started this deep dive talking about how the bow mutated from a polite ribbon into a massive architectural statement piece, largely driven by the modern need to look dynamic from every possible moving angle.
Yeah, the social media effect.
Exactly. So in a world where we increasingly design our lives and our weddings and our clothing to be viewed in sweeping 360-degree orbits on TikTok and Instagram, are we fundamentally changing the very definition of what makes clothing beautiful?
Oh,
Are we now dressing just as much for the uncompromising eye of the camera as we are for the human eye?
it really forces you to question whether a garment is meant to be worn or meant to be broadcast.
It really does blur the line between fashion and performance art. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning the mechanics behind the trends, and keep finding those perfect aha moments in your own styling journeys. We'll catch you next time.